You know what really grinds my gears?
People with space guns built into their
The life cycle of a singular video game is usually pretty simple. A game is announced, it begins its marketing and showcasing campaign, and then soon releases, with the majority of its consumers buying and playing within the first month or so, and then slowly deciding to step away to look forward to new releases, leaving just the die-hard fans to stay and maintain the game's cultural significance.
Oh my god!
Obviously, there are variables to this formula. Competitive multiplayer games, for example, will tend to hold onto their player bases for much longer as fans continuously fight to improve at them and explore different ways of engaging with the game's content. Compare that to single-player games, narrative titles that present an experience with a predetermined stopping point. Regardless of how much replay value a game has or how many DLC expansions are released, it's almost always the case that single-player games aren't held within the community spotlight as much as multiplayer ones. That being said, as of writing, Sony's latest PlayStation 5 endeavor, Concord, has just been officially terminated and will be taken offline and made completely unplayable on the 6th of September, offering refunds to the mere 25,000 people who purchased. A punch to the guts, to put it lightly. A game that reportedly took 8 years and $100 million to develop barely lasted 8 days before being struck from the records and no doubt creating God knows how much e-waste from physical copies. Now, this video is not about Concord. Frankly, I could not care less for Concord. It's part of a saturated genre that I'm already not a massive fan of. The gameplay looks sluggish and boring, the art and character design looks unforgivably uninspired, and all while having the hubris to charge $34.99 in a market that is dominated primarily by free-to-play alternatives. Despite being a title that I would almost never consider playing, let alone buying, my social media feed has been non-stop filled with updates and comments surrounding this one game. But not comments in regards to the game itself, but rather the lack of people actually playing it. I can't go one day on Twitter without seeing a constant stream of screenshots and reports from sites like Steam Charts or SteamDB laughing at Concord's less than stellar concurrent player count and its downright horrifying all-time peak of just under 700 players on PC. Given the type of experience that Sony dreamed Concord of being, a tactical, competitive, long-lasting rival to something like Overwatch, it must have been quite the shock to crunch the numbers and realize that their new esports contender garnered less attention than the 2016 title There's Poop in My Soup. I don't really blame people for looking at how well a game like Concord is doing. It's almost fascinating to watch as Sony's giant stinky sock of an investment quickly goes up in flames. Anything to give Xbox some kind of a leg up in this generation. My personal problem comes from when people will take the data on a game's player count and use it to prescribe themselves an idea of its overall quality. Games that never end up breaking over a certain threshold of concurrent players are suddenly being seen as second-rate and deemed as less valuable regardless of whether it's a multi or single player. This seems to be a more recent phenomena that I've seen from 3 very different games, one being the aforementioned Concord, as well as 2 other recent releases, Black Myth: WuKong and Dustborn. Unless you've been living under a Nimbus cloud, you'll no doubt be aware of the success that Black Myth: WuKong is receiving, and for the most part it seems pretty well deserved. I've actually had my eye on this game ever since it was announced. A game taking inspiration from Chinese mythology sounded pretty unique and fresh in an industry mainly focused on either American or Japanese culture. I haven't played it as of yet because modern full price releases hurt my wallet, but it's certainly on my wishlist. The game looks gorgeous and from what I've seen plays quite similar to something like Sekiro, which I'm 100% here for. The game that, while being something different, is pretty obviously tailor-made to appeal to a wider demographic. After the astounding success of Elden Ring, a game that plays quite similarly while looking just as polished, if not more, was bound to be popular. Dustborn could not be more different.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Being a release from a seemingly even smaller studio, Dustborn sacrifices its wider appeal to tell a more personal story with a lot less spectacle. It is as niche as they come. Despite this, it seems to me that a vocal minority online has made it their mission to prove that WuKong is the vastly superior title in comparison to Dustborn. How did they reach this conclusion? Did they play both games extensively and think over their experience with a critical eye? They took one look at each game, one look at the player count, and deemed one to be every problem with gaming as a whole and the other as the solution to it. But why these two games specifically? If you haven't noticed already from what I've been showing you, Dustborn is a game that wants to appeal to a more specific audience, namely politically active members of the queer community and progressives in general. It contains themes of relationships, art, division, the characters are very diverse, the gameplay seems a bit slower and more casual to emphasize the story, and oh yeah, the first two tags on Steam are LGBTQ+ and political. Like I said, as niche as you can get considering the demographics of the gaming sphere. If you ask me, I have no doubt that WuKong would be the better experience. I'm a guy who, for the most part, vastly prefers gameplay over story, and WuKong seems to have that in spades. Not to say that I would never play Dustborn, but if I had to choose, I'd probably go for WuKong any day of the week. That same vocal minority that hounds Dustborn for its progressive embrace would agree with me that WuKong looks fun, but strangely enough not for the same reason. For context, Black Myth WuKong, like a lot of modern releases, was distributed amongst popular Twitch streamers just before release to create additional buzz. However, it differed compared to other games, in that the studio behind it, Game Science, gave some prerequisites for streamers to abide by. Some of the do not rules include not discussing politics, quote-unquote feminist propaganda, COVID, as well as anything to do with China. With this single demand from Game Science, one particular section of the game's fans rose up in celebration. The same people terrified of China's involvement in the games industry and their censorship, now lauding this Chinese game as a beacon of how games should be apolitical. After the game's release to the public, it then went on to receive significant praise, with those same fans reinforcing their point by noting how this supposedly apolitical anti-woke game was what real gamers actually want, and that games like Dustborn with a significantly lower player count are proof that making your games more political will make them worse as well as result in lower sales. I absolutely do not think that this is the case, and the people who do only say so to confirm their more conservative worldview. Now, I'm not here to discuss the politics themselves. I don't like to, and frankly, I hate confrontation. I simply believe that the quality of a game is defined by the content presented within. Story, characters, setting, art, gameplay, mechanics, controls, progression, replay value, all these things, except maybe the story, have nothing to do with the game's political leaning, nor those of the people that make it. Let's consider the real reason these two numbers are so different. Black Myth WuKong was announced in August of 2020 and immediately grabbed everyone's attention, including myself. Being revealed towards the inception of the PS5 in conjunction with all the hype surrounding Unreal Engine 5 and Nvidia's DLSS, the game certainly seemed like something we all should keep our eye on. From then on, trailers were shown off as the years went by, with special appearances at Gamescom 2023 and 2024. The trailers would all be very big, bombastic, and were made to show off the power of these new technical milestones. Everything that your average gamer wants to see and enjoy. And the devs knew this. Dustborn, on the other hand, while sharing a similar timeline of trailers and promotions, were radically different. The trailers were more dialogue heavy, letting you know the kinds of themes the narrative is going to explore, with technical prowess and raw fidelity taking more of a backseat. Additionally, Dustborn clearly establishes the kind of audience it wants to cultivate. This game is about marginalized characters and thus appeals to the experience, humor, and aesthetics of gamers within marginalized communities. Considering the very generalized demographic of people who play games, it's easy to see why these trailers received backlash, because they simply weren't made for them. But obviously, we can't get to the root of this rabbit hole without looking at the games themselves. For Concord, a game that, as we've seen, required a sustained player base, the whole idea is that the game failed due to being woke or having a progressive lean. And in 2024, woke means that the characters aren't goonable enough. I can't goon to these characters. Despite all the additional criticism that the game has faced that I explained earlier, it's this one aspect that has received by far the most attention. Now, I 100% agree that the characters in this game look absolutely terrible, but that mainly comes down to an absence of creativity, generally unpleasant color palettes, and an overall lack of visual flair and style. Like, look at this character. This isn't an alien, this is just a green human with ugly hair. Take Overwatch for comparison. Every character has their own unique gimmicks about them. They have more aesthetically consistent outfits, and the cartoony style of the game allows for much more expression, which generally helps to make them more likable right off the bat. If the lack of sexualization really is your main complaint, I don't know what to tell you. The game would suck either way, and the lack of player interest would undoubtedly remain the same. Considering player interest was necessary to sustain Concord, it has been very easy for people to lackadaisically blame the game's quote-unquote wokeness for its unsuccess, which is a shame in that it only furthered this sudden deifying of player counts and almost encourages apathy and a lack of critical thinking. Placing player counts as a means of determining whether or not you should play a game only works to deter curiosity. WuKong, from what I've seen, looks like a pretty fabulous experience. Combat looks engaging, the bosses and enemies all look very creative and unique, and all while looking gorgeous being on such a large scale. Additionally, the game provides an average playtime of an impressive 33 hours for just the main story, so you know you're getting value for your money. After the price goes down a little, I'll no doubt be playing it extensively. And it is for that very reason that player retention is so high. Not because the devs behind the game have certain opinions on feminism or politics. Hell, if it wasn't for this one screenshot, WuKong wouldn't even be involved in this discourse at all. I feel like this is an example of people finding it difficult to separate the art from the artist. People feel the need to protect this game and use its popularity to push their own worldview, even when it's entirely irrelevant to the text itself. From what it seems after going through user reviews on Steam, Dustborn's attempt to tell a compelling story has failed. The narrative is shallow and unengaging, the setting is samey and visually generic, and its themes run hollow when you have a protagonist that is supposedly incredibly mean and unlikable. Furthermore, the game ties in references to already dated internet lingo directly into the mechanics of the game itself. For example, when managing relationships with other characters, you have the option to trigger or cancel them. I'm almost convinced that this is supposed to be satirical, maybe even done to egg on controversy, because it just seems so blatantly annoying, like one of those Facebook cartoons making fun of progressive or young people. Either way, it only serves to damage the message of the story going forward, leaving it to age like sour milk before even hitting store shelves. And to make that even worse, the game is apparently highly unoptimized, leaving one of its users to believe that the game is actually a front to hide the fact that it's using his hardware to generate Bitcoin. Like Concord, the progressive lean of Dustborn isn't the reason for it having low player numbers. Similar games like Life is Strange or Celeste are incredibly popular despite tackling similar themes. However, my theory is that this game would both be more popular and have less hate towards it if its potential fans could discover it more organically. See, Dustborn and WuKong received their press through various trailers shown both on their own or as part of shows like Gamescom. The demographic of individuals who actively engage with these trailers and shows are the fans who take gaming more seriously than those who do not. People like me, and if you're watching this video, probably you as well. More casual games like Life is Strange, The Sims, Detroit Become Human got their press organically through content online, watching Let's Plays or challenge videos. The type of game that Dustborn is completely clashes with the type of audience it was actively shown to, resulting in low interest from players right from release. Throughout the last month or so, all three games released and WuKong exceeded expectations, receiving overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam and reaching an all-time peak of nearly 2.5 million concurrent players on PC alone. Dustborn, on the other hand, released receiving mixed to mostly positive reviews, as well as an all-time peak of just 83. But what does that actually mean, and does it matter? When it comes to single player releases, the number of people who have bought and played it makes zero difference to the product itself. Like I said earlier, a good game is just a good game. The only meaningful information that peak player counts offer is an indication of how mainstream a title is, something that Dustborn never even attempted to be in the first place. Black Myth WuKong has been made mainstream due to, like I said before, how it appeals to the widest audience possible. Of course, mainstream games that are bad will receive lower numbers due to word of mouth, but will almost always receive the benefit of the doubt owing to either a popular license or realistic graphics, something that Dustborn has neither of. Even then, we've seen examples of games that release and then receive revivals after some time, usually once they get discovered by content creators. Games like Rust, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, and even Minecraft received a massive boost in relevancy after certain YouTubers and Twitch streamers started to get into them. Do I believe that a revival like this would ever happen to Dustborn? Absolutely not. But my point being that just because games aren't being seen doesn't mean that they don't deserve to be. Like I said, both are single player titles. The conversation would be different if both subscribed to a live service model, one that sustains itself purely on player attention, but they don't. My philosophy when it comes to not only games but movies and shows and all other media texts is that they should be judged within a bubble. Every title you've ever played is the result of thousands of hours of hard work and the passion to do something unique with the medium of video games, whether that be to tell a story or offer a challenge. To simply disregard a game because it isn't relevant or popular enough for your liking is doing yourself a disservice. Play something you've never played before, something that you might not usually pick up. You may be pleasantly surprised, and more importantly, your opinion on the internet will be more valid. I'll never understand the people who say that gamers simply don't want games like Dustborn, games that don't tell more diverse stories. Could you imagine how stale the industry would be, how dry the culture would be if every game ever made was designed specifically to suit one demographic? Not only would it stifle creativity and expression, but it would also make the community significantly smaller. So small in fact that with the prices that exist as of recent years, the industry would likely implode on itself, more than it already is. Games like Concord are in fact ruining gaming, but not because of some unattractive characters or pronouns in the corner of my screen, but because companies are so desperate for profit that they'll sink precious time and far too much money into chasing trends and following algorithms rather than letting creators create. They'll shut down studios and lay off employees for the sake of saving some cash and lining the pockets of the higher-ups instead of embracing and improving the medium that they contribute to. It's no wonder that indie titles are getting the recognition they deserve, and it's a shame to see that people want to go back to the era of the Xbox 360 and PS3, considering the tools we now have to make the scene the best that it's ever been. To summarize, judge the games you play on what counts. Let people enjoy what they enjoy and try to explore every once in a while. You never know what you might find.